My name is Lorna Robin. I was born in Trail and I live in Crawford Bay. When I was growing up, I used to go to summer camp on Kootenay Lake. And those were, I don't know, those were wonderful times for me. I fell in love with Kootenay Lake and I never forgot how much I loved the lake and being by the lake and camping. And so I guess I always wanted to come back to Kootenay Lake. It was a bit of a roundabout route. So I did the university at Victoria, and then I met John in Vancouver, and he had just come back from England. He had spent a couple of years adventuring around Canada, then went back to England and decided he wanted to live in Canada permanently. And he had just got back off the plane when I met him, so it was the right time for us to meet. And that was 1968, and within a few months we were going to Nova Scotia together. So we bought an abandoned farm in Nova Scotia and spent 10 years learning to farm. And the way you farm in Nova Scotia is you borrow money in the spring for seeds and machines, and you work hard all summer and then you pay it back in the fall. And then you wonder what the heck you're going to do all winter to keep body and soul together. So for several winters we logged. We cut pit props for the coal mines that were not too far away. And then one winter, John went to the college in Truro to take a course in blacksmithing. He wanted to learn how to weld, actually, to fix the machinery, which was always breaking, of course. But he saw somebody heat up a piece of metal and hammer it, and he said he was hooked from that time on. He was hooked on blacksmithing. And here's a picture of John at that time, just learning his blacksmithing. So we did that for a few more years. We farmed in the summer and blacksmithed in the winter. John was able to make $2 an hour blacksmithing, which is more than we ever made farming. So, and by the end of 10 years, we had 2 little girls in our family, and I wanted to go back home to British Columbia. So we thought, well, maybe we can make a living out of blacksmithing. So we packed up all the tools into a pickup truck and came back to BC, back to the Kootenays. What I remembered about the Kootenays is that the snow falls straight down, whereas in Nova Scotia it's always horizontal. You always get these blizzards. The snow blows horizontal, huge drifts. Anyway, I remember watching one of those April blizzards in Nova Scotia one time and thinking, I think I want to see the snow coming straight down again. We heard of somebody that knew somebody else in the Kootenay Bay, so we went and visited them, and we looked around for land. We found a piece, and we started building a blacksmith shop. So our first shop was the garage down on Main Street, Crawford Bay. And our second shop was a building we built up on the piece of land we purchased. And we couldn't afford to build a house and a shop, so we built a house with a shop attached. And this kind of seemed like a good idea at the time. And it wasn't too bad when it was just the 2 of us and the 2 children. But then we started hiring people because John had this tendonitis and he couldn't do all the hammering by himself anymore. And so then we were having people like blacksmiths with their dirty boots coming into the kitchen for coffee breaks, and there would be the noise of hammering all day, and it began to drive me nuts. It was really tough to live in a house with a blacksmith shop in it. Lots of noise and dirt, basically, and the dirt was always coming into the house. I know there was a time when I got tired of washing the floor, so I told John that blacksmiths had to take their boots off before they came in for tea. That didn't go down very well, but they did it. Anyway, it drove me to apply for a government grant. The government was offering these interest-free loans to people to build a shop as long as you could promise to hire at least 3 people to work in it. So we did that. I put in the application and we built a bigger shop. So we built the new shop in 1999, along with Tim Elias of Breathless Glass. He needed a place. He wanted a shop on the highway, and he came to us and he said, let's build a shop. Actually, he wanted us to build a shop. He wanted to use our capital and his expertise in building. And so we did. We built a shop, and for 15 years it was Breathless Glass on one side and Kootenay Forge on the other, and lots of tourists. It was a very dynamic combination of wonderful things to watch. And of course I had fireworks and normal copper upstairs, and people would come up and watch that too. Also around that time, John was still looking for more machinery. Because of his tendinitis, he needed to buy power hammers, and we found this wonderful hammer that had been brought to Nelson to build ships back in, I don't know, whenever they were building ships in Nelson, 1850, around there. A wonderful old hammer, and there was 2 blacksmiths in Nelson that were still running a blacksmith shop at that time. So John went to visit them often. And finally, when they retired, they sold him this big hammer that was brought in. It ran off the shaft came through the wall and had this big belt that it ran off. It probably ran off a steam engine to start with. Amazing old machines. Most of our equipment in the shop is over 100 years old. So these old hammers probably used to run from a belt that went to a shaft that went out to a steam engine. So we didn't have a steam engine, it ran on an electric motor, but it's a trip hammer. So this, you step on the foot pedal and the belt engages, and the harder you press, the faster it hammers. So it actually would take quite a delicate touch to do the delicate work that they would do. I don't know if those long tendrils of almost molten looking iron that it looks so fluid, but it comes from such a hard metal. For quite a few years, most of our income came from craft shows. John would travel all over the province at winter time. Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, Victoria, do all the big craft shows. But we found more and more that people would stop at the shop, and they'd be curious. They'd hear the sound of hammering and they'd stop and buy something. So gradually it became more of a highway side business that people would stop. So when John started blacksmithing in BC, there was no tradition of blacksmithing here. There had always been a blacksmith at the mines and the logging camps, but that was long gone, since the Industrial Revolution, really. In the East, there was more of a tradition of blacksmiths making home amenities and everything. Nails, anchors for the fishing boats, chains, everything. Blacksmiths, it's hard to imagine now, but they would make everything that was made out of steel, out of iron. And so coming to BC, it was like we'd say we were going to start a blacksmith shop, and people go, well, good luck with that. That's not going to happen. And I think if I have any advice for young people, it would be to never listen to those voices that say you can't do something. Sometimes they're internal voices, sometimes they're external voices, but don't listen to them. If there's something you want to do, as long as it's not your conscience talking to you, go ahead and do it. So John was an unusual combination of a business person and a blacksmith. So he could make beautiful ironwork, but he also figured out how to sell it. And he also had, after a lot of hammering, he started to have trouble with tendinitis. And he decided he had to hire people. And when you hire people, then you have to find markets so that you have more steady sales and can keep paying them. So here's a picture of some of the people that worked at Kootenay Forge. This was We used to take pictures at Christmas and make some kind of a Christmas card out of them, send them to the stores. John would go to the trade fairs in Toronto, and he had sales reps. So the Kootenay Forge ironwork was going all over the continent. We traveled to shows in Reno and trying to think of the other place where they would have big fireplace shows, and we sold. Other people would sell stoves and fireplace sets, and we sold a lot of fireplace sets there. And so our fireplace sets were in California and Hawaii and New York. It was amazing. While Kootenay Forge was growing, was that there were other artisans sort of coming to light in Crawford Bay. So one thing that we brought back from Nova Scotia was this idea of a craft village, which you see, there's some wonderful places in Nova Scotia where you see a whole village of people doing certain crafts, and sometimes it's all the same crafts. Like in one village, it's rug hooking. They've been doing it for, for centuries, really. But anyway, John always had that idea in the back of his mind that it would be great to have a craft village, with blacksmithing just being part of it. One day, one Christmas, we were at a craft fair in Nelson, and there was people there who had a broom company that were looking for a place to settle. So we said, come to Crawford Bay. And we invited them over, and they looked around. We became very good friends, and they found a place. They found the old barn to set up the broom shop. And then later, I think Janet Wallace was doing her weaving at home, and she saw, oh, these people are making a living, selling to the public. I think maybe I'll try that too. So and that's how it happened. It was never planned, but people were attracted, by seeing John succeeding at this business. And also, he also taught a lot of people. So we counted them up one time, and we figured he trained 20 blacksmiths over the years. Some of them became instructors at the Kootenay School of Arts, and John was actually the first blacksmithing instructor at the Kootenay School of Arts, but he couldn't do both. He couldn't run his own business and do that. So, but he trained the other people that were the first instructors there. So he's had a big influence on the whole craft and blacksmithing in the Kootenays. So I did a lot in the business. I did the bookkeeping. I did a lot of packing, finishing and packing. We were raising these two little girls, which I think I always say one of my best careers has been a mom, I love being a mother. And later on, as they were growing up, I wanted to do more of my own thing, because before it always felt like, well, I was helping John doing the blacksmithing, but it wasn't really mine. So as our girls were growing up, and John had hired more people to help in the shop, so I didn't really need to do all those jobs anymore, I started another business, which was enamel copper. So what I did was cut shapes out of copper and then use glass powders to make colors and designs. And quite often it was combined with iron. I did these pieces myself, but John did a lot of fancier iron to go with the enameling. So we did fish on seaweed and birds on branches and a lot of different things. So we were kind of side by side working these two different businesses, but also combining them. I called my business Fireworks Enamel Copper. Fireworks because I was using a kiln fire to melt the glass, and also because of all the colors and kind of like little explosions of color. So that was the name I came up with. And I had different people working for me. One of my daughters worked with me for 3 years, and I hired other people to work with me. Um, for me, the jewelry started out as a way to do lots of little experiments without wasting too much material. So, but then I really started to love doing the bigger pieces, and John and I would work together. So he would do the iron and I would do the enameling. Here's an example. Although in that particular one, I actually did the ironwork because as time went by, I wanted to learn how to do the ironwork as well. So I could do the whole piece myself. And I guess I have to give credit back to John again, because he was the one that started the copper enameling as well. He used to do a lot of different crafts when he was growing up, and he had samples of copper enameling that he did when he was a teenager. And when I was looking around for something to do, he pulled out his old copper enameling and said, "Well, why don't you do that?" And at first I resisted, I confess, because I wanted it to be mine. I didn't want it to be, another idea of John's, but it very quickly became mine, with my own ideas and my own creations. But it was lovely for us to be able to work off each other, share ideas, and for me I could take a bird to him and say, do you think you can make a branch for this? And we would design it together, and we had a lot of fun, really, doing that. There's lots of stories, lots and lots of stories. Oh, and with the tourists as well, we were often people watching us. And one time when we were being watched, I caught fire, caught my shirt on fire, so I was kind of casually walking over to the slag tub and getting myself wet and kind of trying to pretend that nothing out of the ordinary was happening. So over the years, lots of school children have come to get a blacksmithing demonstration. So I just wanted to show how John has inspired other artists as well. Thank you, Mr. John Smith. And here's a cartoon somebody made. Bonk, bonk, bonk. Making very fancy golf clubs, which of course he never actually did. Then we were getting older, so thinking about retirement, and one of our daughters, wanted to come back from Vancouver and work in the family business, and she brought her husband, who started to learn blacksmithing and turned out to be a very good blacksmith. And so gradually they learned the business, and gradually we sold it to them. And John gradually retired. It took him several years to actually retire. He just would like to go to the shop and help as much as he could. So they've been running the business for about 17 years now. In 2008, there was a recession. So all these orders from all these stores all over the continent really just dried up. It was like somebody turned off a tap. And all the blacksmiths had to be laid off. So there was quite a collection of people working there, but they all had to be laid off. And it's a bit of a tragedy, because you can't just rehire people back a year later. They've found other things to do. It takes a long time to train somebody. And so there was always this question after that, okay, is it really worth training somebody for 2 years? And are we expecting this business to grow back? And most blacksmiths are more comfortable with a smaller cottage industry, like all the blacksmiths we know and met. There was only one other production shop in North America that we knew of. It was in Kentucky. And they were the only shop we knew of that had more employees than we did. So markets were changing as well. So craft fairs dwindled. There was a lot more permanent craft type stores opening up. There was more quality goods coming in from China. Especially, I'm thinking of ironwork now, that people could buy ironwork much more cheaply from China around that time. So the markets were changing. Of course, the quality of Kootenay forge ironwork is what carries it through. And so it continues to carry it through. When people want something that looks beautiful and is going to last, that's what they'll buy. So the business is smaller now, but it's still doing online orders, and of course the tourist trade in our area has increased a lot. So there's a lot of retail sales in the summer, and because there's more artisan, it also attracts more tourists to come to the area. A lot of people make it a destination to come and visit the artisans, and a lot of the secret of the success is they can actually watch people at work making things. So this is something a lot of people don't understand these days, is how things are made, where they actually come from. So to see things being made and then to be able to buy it, it's a real personal connection that people have with the work, and that's way different from buying something from China. So the business goes on, it's changed, and no doubt it will change again. So when I was about 60, I started a hiking group. And I think my main mentor was Terry Turner. You know him as a geologist and historian, many people do, but he's also the most amazing hiker. There's summers where he would bag a peak and then come home, rest for a day, and then go up another peak the next day. And he would do that week after week all summer long. He took his kayak up to Plaid Lake. He dragged it up through the snow so he could kayak on Plaid Lake. I mean, who would do that? Nobody but Terry would do that. Anyway, so I would say he's my biggest inspiration in the hiking world. He also was instrumental in helping some other people get a book together. Craig and Kathleen Copeland wrote a book called Where Locals Hike in the West Kootenay. And that's basically been my Bible. So I've been trying to do every hike in that book. The hiking group that I belong to, it's mostly older people because we chose Tuesdays as our hiking day. And so, of course, it can't be people who work on Tuesdays. And also, I don't know, maybe, people like to be with people their own age, I suppose, for the most part. But there have been quite a few young people come with us over the years, just different times. A lot of younger people have come with us to learn the trails and find out how to get there and so on. And that's been a learning experience for all of us. Terry has taken us to unknown places, and the Copeland's book, and then there's the Kootenay Mountaineering Club, which is a great resource for people to want to get out there. But it always amazes me how few people actually get up in the mountains. We have fabulous scenery here around the lake, and being on the lake and walking beside the lake, I love it. And it's a whole different world once you get up a few thousand feet. It's just, the scenery is different. Every mountain is different. Like from here, they all look the same. But once you get up them, every mountain is different. And there's the alpine lakes, there's the flowers, huge meadows of gorgeous flowers up high. Flowers that you never see down below in the valley. And of course, there's the animals and just the joy of using your body that way. We've been lucky in this area because prospectors opened up a lot of trails, and you see the remains of their mines and diggings. Well, a lot of the backcountry isn't accessible till July, till enough snow melts to be able to drive up. But that's when the wildflowers bloom. And they'll start in June on southern slopes, and then in July is probably where you get the most flowers. But they're blooming all summer. August, not so much in September, but there's some still trying. I've got pictures of flowers with with the snow on them up at Jumbo Pass, where the September snow comes when the flowers are still blooming. So in the winter time, of course, there's lots of opportunity for cross-country skiing and snowshoeing as well. There's no set trails. I generally just follow the logging roads and then look for a place that I want to go up. But you shouldn't without some training, without some avalanche training. We have had some avalanches up that way, and you should always have a buddy and have avalanche training to go very far. If you don't want to go into the wilderness, there's always the golf courses, which are wonderful for cross-country skiing, and some of the lower level logging roads close to home. In more recent years, the East Shore Trail and Biking Association has been building trails, and there's some wonderful low-level trails for either hiking or biking all over the peninsula, the Crawford Peninsula, and along the shore of Kootenay Lake that leads where you go down to Grey Creek. There's nice trails up there. So, and there's lots of resources. You know, there's the websites now where you can find hikes. I wanted to mention the Kootenay Mountaineering Club, which I belong to. I don't get to hike with them much because it's just a little hard getting across the lake early enough and the ferry to meet up with people across the lake. But I do follow the website and learn new hikes from them, and also I've led a few hikes on this side for the Kootenay Mountaineering Club. One of my favorite hikes is the Whitewater Canyon, which is in between Caslow and New Denver, up that way, and it's worth remembering because it's an easy access. It's only about 4 or 5 kilometers on a rough road, and then you're at the trailhead, which is unusual. Like, quite often you have to travel for an hour, 2 hours on rough roads to get to the trailheads, but that one's easy access. And then there's such a variety. You go up this huge canyon, grizzly bear territory, and then you're going through an alpine meadow, then there's a rock slide, and then eventually you get to a glacier with these beautiful blue tarns below it. And I was actually able to walk under the glacier one time in an ice cave under the glacier. And the geology up there too is like there's all these huge serpentine rocks. They're some as big as cars. And there's just so much variety. It's emptiness in a way, I guess. It's just really connecting with wildness and with ancient things, you know, the mountains, the glaciers, you know, the ice. It's ancient ice on those glaciers. 10,000 years old. I don't know, everything. The air is clear, the stars are brighter. There's interesting animals that you don't see in the valleys, and their tracks and their droppings. Plants. I take a lot of pictures, and then I try to find out a bit more about the plants and so on. So I become a bit of a go-to person that way. When I'm hiking with people, they ask me, "What's this and what's that?" And that's just because I'm the one who takes pictures and goes and looks them up. And then knowing the name of something, sometimes people think that's all they need to know, but that's only the beginning of what to know. And you can watch it in different seasons. You can watch it at different altitudes, like when you're climbing, you know, from, say you're climbing from 3 or 4,000 feet to 6,000 feet, and you can see the same plant in all the different stages of its growth. You can see it all the way from spring to winter. You can see it at the higher altitudes just coming up out of the snow, and lower down it's already made its seeds, and you know, it's amazing that way. So just doing the altitude takes you through time in a way. So we also have quite a few huts and cabins up in the Alpine. They're run by the Columbia Hut Society or the Alpine Club of Canada or BC Parks. And that's another way to have a vacation in the mountains, right? You gotta sweat it. There's no way to get up there except walk. But once you're there, you can stay for a few days and just wander in the Alpine and see the stars more clearly than you've ever seen them in your life before. And I just would want to encourage people to get up our mountains because they're so beautiful. And there's, you can just go anywhere and just be amazed.